Georgia's governor saying today that state will start reopening this Friday. Gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, body art studios, barbers, cosmetologists, hair designers, nail salons, massage therapists. Is this a good idea?
Well, it might not be the way I would prioritize reopening businesses within a state. I think it's important that every state, have discretion to make decisions about when they start reopening the economy. I think most states should be looking to try to do that starting in May, and some states are going to be look to do it much later in May. The hard-hit states in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic region, probably the Pacific Northwest. But there will be some rural states that haven't had a lot of cases that will look to start reopening activity in early May. I think it's important to try to bring back some activity that gives people a sense of normalcy. Reopen parks, hang nets at basketball courts and tennis courts, maybe allow outdoor classes for gyms, things like that. But reopening indoor spaces where people congregate for purely recreational purposes, where you have a lot of shared surfaces, that should probably be later on the list. I think we should try to get people back to work earlier and prioritize that rather than reopening gyms and bowling alleys. But, states are going to make individual decisions. As far as Georgia, they've had a pretty big epidemic. They've had 19,000 cases to date, 733 deaths in that state. They're in the bottom 10 of states in terms of testing. And so one of the things that the governor said today was that they wanted to significantly ramp their testing capability. They do have a long way to go to get testing up in that state because they are testing. Right now, they've tested about 0.8% of the state, which ranks them in the bottom 10 of states in the country.
If you were a resident of the state of Georgia this evening, would you go to any of the businesses that I mentioned to you this coming Friday or thereafter? Even on Monday, they're going to continue opening other places, including restaurants and theaters and private clubs.
Well, you shouldn't tempt me about when I would go get a haircut if I had the option. But I think spaces where people congregate indoors for purely recreational activities probably should be things that open later. So indoor gyms, bowling alleys, things like that, movie theaters. I think you want to prioritize those second and try to get people back at work first and reintroduce work and make sure you can do that safely. You do want to introduce some social activities, and I think a lot of things can be moved outside. So you can have, gym classes outside. You can try to hold religious services outside. I think we should be looking to do that, allow religious services to resume with proper social distancing held outside. I think that there's opportunities to do that. Again, I wouldn't be looking to resume these activities until the beginning of May. We're still in an epidemic here in this country. We still haven't seen sustained reductions over the course of the nation as a whole, especially the places that have been hot spots. And so I think we need to start seeing sustained reductions, real reductions in hospitalizations before we can start making decisions on a wide basis to start resuming some element of normal activity here.
There was another interesting story this evening, according to USC and the Los Angeles Department of Public Health, that the outbreak in Los Angeles County could be up to 55 times higher than previously reported. What do you make of that?
Well, these were serology tests that look at exposure to the infection based on people's production of antibodies. So when you're exposed to the infection, you would produce antibodies. And they estimated that anywhere between 2 and about 5% of people that were tested had antibodies and had been exposed to the infection. I think that there were a lot of things that we need to look at very carefully about this particular survey. One is the question of how people were enrolled in it and whether it was truly a representative sample. The other is the test itself. They assumed a specificity, an accuracy of 99.5%, I believe, on this test. That would be higher than any serology test on the market. Most of the serology tests have a specificity of about 95%. And the reason why that matters is when you have a test that isn't completely accurate, probing for a low probability event, and that low probability event being having antibodies to the coronavirus, the error gets magnified. At anywhere from 25 to 50% of your results could be wrong if you have a low specificity test of, let's say, 95%. And so assuming the specificity of this test was more in line with what we're seeing in the market, and not the super high specificity that they assumed, the super high reliability that they were assuming, that would really push the results down substantially, and so would make those results really inconclusive. So I think you need to look very carefully at this. What we really need is widespread serology tests done on a broader basis with tests that have been verified by the Food and Drug Administration, so we understand exactly what their sensitivity and specificity is. We don't have that yet, and so I think that all the tests that are coming out right now, they're informative, certainly, but I don't think we can draw broad conclusions based on them.
You said that we currently have a, quote, loose national strategy when it comes to testing. Does the federal government, the administration, need to take a larger role in testing itself rather than putting it on the states?
Well, they announced today that they're taking a larger role in trying to make testing equipment available to the states. And I think that's a wholly appropriate and timely position for the federal government to be taking, trying to make sure that there's testing supplies available to the states, looking to use the muscle of the federal government to try to instigate more manufacturing of low commodity items that have come into short supply, and really are limiting the ability of states to conduct testing. You know, the states are going to have to stand up these facilities within the states. A lot of these are run out of academic labs in the states. They're the clinical labs that the states contract with and work with. And I think the states can continue to lead the charge on that. Where the states are going to need help is on the testing supplies, where they're pulling on an international supply chain for a lot of this equipment. And that's really where the federal government can help, both trying to domesticate more manufacturing here in the U.S. and also making sure that we're securing our fair share of these products from overseas. A lot of these companies are multinational companies that don't want to just supply the U.S. market, but want to supply their foreign markets as well. But, you know, if they're primarily a U.S. customer and they're U.S. domiciled businesses, I think they need to accommodate the U.S. customers as well, and maybe even prioritize U.S. customers. And that's someplace where the federal government could be helpful.
And finally, Dr. Gottlieb, we'll bring it full circle, talk about the reopen. Do you think businesses are prepared to reopen? You have a long list of things you tweeted today of guidelines, essentially, that businesses should follow to reopen safely.
Right, and I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal today outlining some of the things businesses, I think, should be thinking about. I think businesses are starting to put these plans in place, but I would encourage all businesses to start doing this right now, because it's going to take time to try to get good plans in place in terms of how to return workers to jobs safely and what measures to put in place in the workplace. Some of that might take some advanced planning. You're going to have to purchase certain equipment. So I think it behooves most businesses to start thinking about that right now. And you're going to see the governors roll out their plans, their state plans, in the coming week or two about how they plan to approach reopening. And that's going to be a pretty important guide to businesses. So it behooves businesses to start thinking about that now.